What is up, you guys? Welcome to episode 2 of Ableton from Scratch. I'm Armon, and it's during the age of the coronavirus. Hope everyone is keeping safe and well. To help escape the cabin fever today, it's a nice day in Toronto. I thought I'd come outside and see if I can shoot this little intro for you out on my balcony. As you can see, the streets are still pretty empty, even though it's a beautiful day. Alright, last week in lesson 1, we learned how to navigate the 4 main areas of Ableton. That included the mixer session view, the arrangement view, the instrument and audio effects bank, and your sound banks. Today we're going to jump into programming drums and a few tips and tricks to help your drums come to life and sound natural. Alright, let's dive into the computer and see what we can do. Alright guys, so here we are in a fresh session of Ableton Live. I'll just hit the tab key to flip over into the arrangement view. And we're going to get started with drums, which are both going to be on MIDI lanes or MIDI channels, so we can get rid of some of this clutter. I'm going to delete these audio channels. We're not going to need those. Now for the kick, with the low end, we'll make it white. I always like to have my kick white. We'll rename that channel by hitting Command R and label that as kick. The channel below, I'll just make that yellow, and I'll rename that as drums. Now, the reason I like to set up 2 separate channels for these is that the kick is a very bassy low-end instrument, while the other drums are going to be the highs, such as a click, a snap, a clap, a snare drum, or a hi-hat. High-end frequency range. So the way we're going to add audio effects on that and process those sounds later throughout the song is going to be quite different because of the very different nature of these sounds in terms of their frequency range. So the kick is just going to be the one sound, so we don't actually need to put a drum rack in. We just simply need to click on the sound that we want, the sample we want, and it'll just put it into a little sampler for us. So all we need to do to get started on that is just find the sound we want. So come over here to drums, expand the drum hits, go to kicks, and we can preview some sounds and see which ones we might like. I'm going to write a progressive house beat, I think, today, so I'm looking for something kind of chunky, a good amount of low end on it, nothing too sharp or trebly or edgy sounding. That's nice. All right, so let's double click that, and like I said, you'll just see it pop up here in a sampler at the bottom of your screen in the instrument bank. So great, all we need to do to start writing that in is to highlight, say, 4 measures, and then press Command-Shift-M, and a new sequencer block will appear for us. Now down here, you'll see that I'm clicking the piano roll and I'm not getting any sound on these notes. That's because, like I showed you in lesson 1, you've got to turn on the preview, which is this little blue icon. You've got to snap that on, and now you'll hear that in your headphone. So you can hear that the pitch goes down as I select lower notes on the scale. And I'm just going to go with what's called middle C. It's kind of the middle of a piano keyboard, and that's the sort of native sound of the sample. So I'll just double click here. And also, before we get going, always good to set the speed of the track up at the top left. So that's a little slow for progressive house. I'd say let's try 124. Press enter. So I'll continue writing in my notes on each downbeat for a 4-4 or 4 to the floor beat. Press spacebar to hear how that's sounding. All right, let's just duplicate that by highlighting the whole measure from here and hitting Command D, fill up the 4 measures. All right, now if we want that to run on loop so we can keep tweaking the sound as we go, highlight all that and hit Apple L. And now you can see at the end of that, it's going to start playing for us again. All right. Now that kick is okay, but maybe it's a little bit dull. Maybe we want to add a little bit of a flair here by having a little pickup note. Okay. At the bottom of the screen here, you're going to notice these little red sticks. What those are is the velocity for each note. So it kind of represents how hard you strike each drum if it was, out in the real world. So because this one here is going to be a little pickup, I'm going to make the velocity of that a little bit lower than its friend to the right. So I'm going to drag that down. And now let's listen again. That's better. Perfect. Now, if you want to control the velocity on all of the notes together at one time, what you can do is hit Command A, and then hold down the Command key. And when you drag down one of these, it's going to drag down all of them for all the notes, and you can adjust the velocity easily for all of them at once. Alright, so that kick is sounding okay. Let's move on to the other drums now. So because we're going to be inputting multiple drums, here we do want to go to the instruments section and get the drum rack. Just double click and it appears down here at the bottom. And we're going to fill each of these little squares, well not every single one, but a number of them, with different sounds that we want in our beat or our groove. So then we're going to come to drums once again. And now let's look for some hi-hats, perhaps a nice closed tight hi-hat to kind of give us 16th notes and give us the groove. Something nice and tight. That sounds pretty good. Let's double click that. Oops, sorry, don't double click that. That you want to just drag down with your mouse and put in one of these little squares. And you can see we've got so many to work from here that we can just start grabbing in many of the sounds that we like, even if ultimately we don't use them. So don't be shy to just pull a lot of sounds into your drum rack down here. Then we can come and find a clap. That's not bad, I'll get that one. It's also nice to have some kind of a rim shot or click sound in a progressive house beat, kind of help add a little bit to the groove. That's not bad. I also like coming to the miscellaneous percussion section and looking for some kind of interesting sort of lower tuned drum. It sounds good in progressive house beats to have a couple extra kind of chunky drum hits in the groove that are different from the actual kick drum. Something like that could work. Let's bring that in. And for once your song really gets going, it's nice to also have either a ride cymbal or an open hi-hat. Let's see if we can find a nice open hat. That's pretty nice. And finally, it's also nice to sometimes have some kind of little shaker to add a little bit of movement in the background. This is going to be a sound that's going to be kept pretty quiet, kind of more of the felt, not heard concept. That could do. Okay, let's see what we can compose with that. So I'm going to highlight here, again, Command-Shift-M, and now all of our sounds are loaded here that we added into our drum rack. We can preview them by clicking on the notes of the keyboard. So I think it's usually easiest to start out with the tight hi-hat, the closed hi-hat, which is kind of going to mark your rhythm. Let's try maybe doing some 16th notes. Highlight that whole measure and duplicate it. Okay, that's probably going to be a bit loud, so I'm going to hit Shift-Tab to get out of here. I'm going to go down here and find where that hi-hat is. Turn down the volume a little bit. That's a little better. Let's get back into the piano roll. You can also just double click on this section of sequencer block that we made. Okay, let's maybe add a clap. Now, if we decide that the velocity is a bit too high or not high enough on one of these individual sounds, if it's marked together at the same time as the hi-hat, you see the problem that you have is down here, you only see one marker for the velocity. So the way to get around this is just click on the sound that you want to adjust, hold down the command key, and when you hover over it, you're going to get this little marker, and that lets you individually drag up or down the velocity for that note only, leaving the hi-hat underneath it all alone. That sounds a little better. Let's copy that over to the next downbeat. Okay, now it's time to maybe introduce a little bit of the open hi-hat. Now, it's sometimes fun to use something like the rim shot as a little marker to add some swing by using an offbeat. So what I mean by that is instead of putting this kick in together with the clap, like say like this over here, we're going to put it somewhere kind of out on its own. Something like that. Let's put the velocity down a little bit. sorry, wrong way. That's what we have in mind. Now next we might want to go for a little bit of that other percussion, that other drum. And with these you can kind of just get creative, take a couple guesses at where they might sound good. That's not bad. Maybe I'll take the velocity on that one down a little bit. Maybe we can introduce that shaker in a couple spots. Now, there is a danger in overdoing it with a beat and over-composing. But like I said, this is going to be a progressive house groove, and progressive house beats tend to have quite a number of elements in them. They're fairly busy beats, which is what helps kind of give the music that drive and active feeling. It can even make the song sound faster than it is. So I don't think we're at that point of overdoing it just yet. And you can see we're using some of these things only twice within the 4 bars, so we're not going to overcomplicate it, but we do want a nice variety of sounds to layer up this beat. That sounds a bit off. So you can see that part of the process here is just really using your ears and trying to understand what sounds natural. That doesn't sound too bad. And let's work on this sound here and see how we can make it sound a little nicer. Some of these drums are probably going to benefit from a little bit of reverb, and some of them, like the hi-hat, which we'll work on now, could benefit from a little bit of movement to make it sound a little bit more natural. So what I mean by that is right now we've got the velocity for all of them at the bottom set to the same amount. So what we actually want to do is go through and kind of give accents on some of them. So instead of just like tick, 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 we kind of want to hear tick, 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 tick. Oops. So let's actually solo the hi-hat sound. So the way to do that is to hit Shift Tab, come back out here. That's the hi-hat. We're just going to hit the little S down here to solo it. Now when we play that, that's all we hear. We can still hear the kick, of course, from our other channel. So let's go back into the piano roll. And in fact, let's go ahead and just mute the kick as well by clicking off the channel 1 up there. So what I've got in mind here is on the the 5th strike, the first hi-hat of the next measure, we're going to have that stand out a little. So we're also going to drag these ones down a bit. Maybe have the second one actually a little boosted relative to the others. Now you can hear that start to move a little bit. And then the second one the first strike of the 3rd bar, we're going to have that heavy strike again. So we also need to drag these ones down a bit. Again, perhaps creating a bit of extra movement, the slightly higher strike on the second one. These ones here also need to be reduced relative to this guy, oops, so that it stands out. So we'll select all of them together. Again, holding down Command. You can hover on any one of them and get that little marker that lets you know you can now drag down the velocity. Let's hear that back. Okay, not bad. All right, I'm happy with that, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete these ones over here and just duplicate the section that we've worked on. Let's bring back our kick. And let's bring back the other drums too. All right, let's go ahead and duplicate all of this because I'm pretty happy with this groove. Now you can see we've got a full 4 measures on loop, and we can continue working on this sound. Okay, a couple things are jumping out at me. I think the open hi-hat is a little strong. Take the volume down just a little. It also strikes me that that clap sound is a little bit dry. So I think that's one of the ones we might consider adding some reverb to. So we'll come up here to Audio Effects, and we will select the reverb. And remember from session 1, if we put that reverb out here, it's going to go on every single drum, and that's going to sound like this. Right? Everything's completely washed out. So we want that reverb only on this clap. So the way to do that is to drag it in with our mouse into this little line, into this little lined area here. So you grab it from the top, click and drag it over until you see it insert itself, and then let go. Let's solo that clap. Again, hitting this little S. That might be a little too much reverb, so I'll come over here to the dry wet, which is the amount of reverb being given to the signal. I'll drag that down a bit. That's what I've got in mind. All right, that's nice. I like that. So, how do you keep this groove interesting as the song goes on? Let's give ourselves another section by just duplicating this, Command D, this as well. Maybe before you introduce a new melody, you give yourself a measure where you lift the kick off, for example. Just clip away the end of this. Let's hear how that sounds. And then boom, a new melody comes in there, for example. Alright guys, so there you go. That's your first drum groove. I hope that's been helpful and you can play around and have some fun creating some beats. Please tune in next week again. We're going to continue working on the same song, where we're going to get started on adding in a bass line.